welcome to Property Matters here on Dublin South FM. You can contact the show on Twitter, Facebook or LinkedIn at iPropertyRadio, or indeed email the show at hello@iPropertyRadio.com. Your host for today is myself, Tallon, and I'm delighted to be joined by Sean Murphy, founder and personal loan advisor at Simpler.ie. Sean, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Sean, Simpler.ie. What is Simpler.ie?
Yeah, so we're an online mortgage broker. So we set up back in September 2018. So we've been around for a while. So basically, we're an online mortgage application process, kind of aimed towards kind of first-time buyers. So the idea is that we've created a kind of a nice kind of online mortgage application that you can use, on your phone, on the website, whatever. And then we follow that up with a good service and independent, honest mortgage advice. I mean, that's basically it.
Okay, well, obviously on the show here, we're huge advocates of automating all parts of the property process, including mortgage and conveyancing. But in terms of mortgage applications, because there's just so much paperwork involved, how have consumers, how have they embraced online applications?
We done a ton of work on this maybe 2 years ago. We kind of had a look at kind of the paper applications that the bank were kind of sending out to everyone, and we kind of spent a lot of time, we got kind of people with copyright experience to kind of look at it and kind of put that into kind of more personable language and just kind of talk to them like a person. I mean, when you're online, it's a different environment. If I walk into a bank, I'm kind of expecting kind of a formal, application process, whereas I'm talking to someone online, what's your name? What are you doing? How much do you want to borrow? That type of stuff. It's just the phrasing of the questions. It's different. So we do quite well. I mean, a lot of people who start their applications, I think it was, we'd like excellent stats on people starting and then finishing a mortgage application. And once you've done that part, I mean, it's just getting on the phone to them or getting on email and just following on from there, I guess. But do you think trust, I can remember we were having these kind of conversations maybe 10 years ago as to what could go online and what couldn't. And trust is such a huge thing online. It's one of the most difficult things when you're building out a digital offering, particularly one around something that's important as giving all of your information and your private data, everything about your financial situation. Trust is such a huge element. In terms of your communications and marketing out to consumers, how are you instilling that trust? And I know the internet has moved on, obviously, over the past decade, but trust is still an important feature. Yeah, I remember, I think it was the first weekend we launched, we had about 5 different emails just coming in saying kind of, is this a scam? And we've done a few things. I mean, we added like chatbots to the website. We put a few of the bank logos. We have agency with up there. And I don't know what changed, but I don't think we got a single person asking if we were a scam after that. But it's obviously more than that. I suppose what we've kind of changed, we've been at this for a while now. We've been doing it for almost 3 years. So we've gotten pretty good at it. And so I suppose the key thing is we kind of like to use the phone more than we did at the start. So generally, you kind of, obviously with their permission, give them a call once they put in their application, kind of introduce yourself, chat, and basically try and give a good impression as you can in 15 minutes. Connect with them on LinkedIn, just let them know you're a real person and you exist. I mean, is the challenge really? But people are buying into it because, I mean, everyone's online now because of COVID, so it's how it's going to work.
Yeah, it's been an interesting year or 11 months. I mean, are you noticing anything in terms of trends? And by that, I mean, we've seen in the UK and Ireland that house hunting applications, people viewing properties online, maybe outside of their own areas, there's definitely increasing demand. And I'm not sure if that demand is necessarily going to translate into the market, or is it a case that people have more time to indulge in something that has always been a bit of a national pastime, that is, looking at property. I mean, how are your applications faring compared to this time last year?
We've got a lot of people with mortgage approval who are kind of desperately trying to find a house is the major trend. So loads of people with approvals, and there's just not enough properties out there for them. And the ones that are out there, you have to do a virtual viewing to see them. And there's just all, or they're not built yet because construction is stalled. So it's tough at the minute. There's a lot of people who really, really want to buy. They're in situations they don't like, and they just can't find something to buy.
Okay, I think that's an interesting one, Sean, because we hear anecdotally, like we know that mortgage loan approvals are at historically high rates, and that's not translating into the mortgage or into the marketplace yet. And right, one conclusion we can draw from that is that people aren't able to find the right property. But I mean, is that necessarily the case? Like, or have we a situation where people are getting loan approval and maybe not being as serious about looking to find a property, or maybe not being as committed, or worst of all, not being realistic about what's achievable within their area? And could that explain part of this mismatch as well, rather than it simply being that there's not enough properties available?
I think that's always been the case. I think there's always been people who've applied for mortgages and they're not super serious or ready to go. But I if you're sitting at home and you've nothing to do, I mean, most people don't really find filling out a mortgage application a nice pastime. Even with a beautiful application process like ours, I mean, there's a lot of paperwork, a lot of things you don't really want to do. So yeah, there is a bit of that, and there's a bit of people who have kind of unrealistic expectations. But I mean, the thing that's pushing them back is, I would say there's just lack of supply, and supply that is there can tend to be expensive. Because the other thing, I mean, people who have second properties and stuff like that, they're not or people who are not first-time buyers, movers. I mean, if you're trying to buy a property and you're already in a property, finding one place and selling the place you're in, that's a task at the minute. It's very hard to the whole process is kind of slowed down from like the bank side of things. The bankers aren't as fast. You have to instruct the valuation. The valuers technically aren't out valuing stuff at the minute. I mean, solicitors are slow, brokers are slow. The whole supply chain is just slow. I had someone the other day who's had a problem with getting their life insurance. So a letter had to be sent to the doctor. Do you think the doctor is fast right now? I mean, it's the whole thing is slowed down.
Yeah, no, it's interesting to take a look at, because look, you're absolutely right. Supply, we have a problem with supply, and new homes aren't coming to the market as quick as we would like, and obviously that's likely to be even further impacted this year with ongoing COVID-19, if not necessarily shutdown, then certainly restrictions. But actually, what we're seeing when we speak to agents is that the sellers or potential sellers of secondhand property seem to be quite slow to put their property on the market. And it occurs to me that they're part of the cohort that you've just described there, that the people who would be buyers and might have their mortgages in place, but feel that maybe this isn't the time to put their existing home on the market. Is that, do you get any of that kind of information? Do you get that kind of depth of information from your applicants?
Sometimes, yeah. But I mean, I was talking to an auctioneer earlier in the week, and one of her clients was talking about kind of selling their investment property, and she kind of said, if you sell this investment property, you could be without rental income for the next 6 months while I sell that, because you have to get the tenants out of the place. So there's definitely a big knock-on effect from all this type.
And actually, I'm going to ask something that's perhaps a bit of an unfair question, as it would be unfair to anybody dealing with mortgages in Ireland. But because the reporting, particularly since the new year, is really highlighting Ireland's mortgage interest rates as compared with that right across Europe, and we are consistently the highest. And I know this is a very unfair question to ask, but I mean, what is happening at the moment that is keeping those mortgage rates consistently high? And are consumers starting to ask the question as to why in Ireland we're paying so much more compared to any other European country?
This is one of those things that often amazes people. So I would deal with first-time buyers almost primarily, and their concern, they're not hugely rate sensitive is what I would say. Their first concern is kind of getting in and getting the mortgage and just they want peace of mind. They want to get into the house. And obviously it's our job to get them the best rates and the best deals. But it's not something that would deter someone from buying a house. Now, in terms of like the rates available at the minute, there seems to be some pressure forcing them down. I mean, it's not likely to happen fast. I mean, Avant came into the market last year, obviously with a rate to kind of undercut everyone else. So they seem willing to move the rates down, but it doesn't seem like it's something that's going to happen overnight, unfortunately.
That's really worrying to hear that first-time buyers aren't rate sensitive, and unfortunately, I think this is just so symptomatic that of our marketplace here in Ireland, that we've come to expect affordability issues. We've come to expect that things are going to be overpriced in terms of the property transaction. It's really worrying, actually. I think it speaks to the financial education, the real world financial education. And I say this as somebody who was on the wrong side of that. It's really worrying that people aren't so rate sensitive, particularly with the introduction of Avant into the marketplace. Has that created a shift? Because it's created an awful stir media wise, but in real terms across consumers, has it created much?
I'm rarely asked about Avant. I actually don't have agency with Avant yet, but I've maybe been asked 2 or 3 times. I mean, it's not something. It's still kind of a high end kind of a product. There's restrictions in there on LTVs and stuff like that. I mean, I don't think they do 90% LTVs. I could be wrong. But no, it's not something I kind of. It certainly hasn't deterred me or my ability to get clients not having an agency with them.
Okay. Your service, is that nationwide?
Yeah.
Okay, so are you able to give us any kind of insight into trends that you're seeing on a regional basis?
Not really, no. I suppose one thing you're kind of seeing more of is, I suppose we have the working from home thing, obviously. So everyone's able to work from home, and it's great, but it doesn't mean you can get a mortgage. If you're working in Dublin, it doesn't mean you can get a mortgage working in mortgage in Clare or whatever. But there is still people moving out of the city, I suppose. Or every city, I guess.
Are you actually seeing that? Because we've spoken a lot about this, and we did a whole show dedicated to remote work where we looked at the trends and tried to see, because it's still early days. People are talking about moving outside. They might be there temporarily at the moment, and they're saying, "Hey, this works. We might do this permanently." But are you starting to see this in the mortgage applications?
It's a bit of a myth, the idea that you can just live everywhere. I think what's happening mostly is that you're having people, like, for example, I've a client she's from Monaghan originally, and she's working in Dublin, and her employer has basically said, right, after COVID, you're only going to have to come in 3 days a week into the office. So she's kind of saying, okay, I'll make that drive for an hour and a half, 3 days a week. I can do that. If I go to a bank and I can say, look, this person is working remotely from Dublin, but they want to buy in Kerry, the bank will say, well, their employer explicitly needs to say after COVID, they're remote forever. And a lot of employers are not willing to say that because they haven't worked it out themselves. Obviously, it's still a new thing. But I think it's mostly people taking the initiative themselves, saying, look, I only have to go to the office 3 days a week. So I'm willing to move a bit further out than I normally would. I think that's what's really happened more than anything else.
Okay, that's a really interesting one. I haven't come across that before. And actually, it's something that hadn't even crossed my mind before, that somebody whose employment whose employment technically is in Dublin, but if they're being given the option to remote work, even part-time, we know that those people are looking in more rural areas and they're willing to do the commute. I suppose I hadn't followed that thought fully through to the logical conclusion of actually the banks wanting to be sure that the employment is sustainable remotely, albeit part of the time. So what does an applicant have to provide? Is it a letter from their employer stating a willingness to allow remote work?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And that was in place before COVID. If you could get the employer to, explicitly state this is what's happening, then yeah, banks were okay with that.
Okay, that's an interesting, and say from the start of the new year, and I appreciate we're only just at the start of February now, but what kind of trends are you seeing? Because obviously last September we might have been more hopeful as to where we would be, in spring of 2021. Now that we're here, it's looking, increasingly less hopeful. What kind of trends are you seeing from your buyers at the moment? Their plans for 2021?
At the minute, I suppose I'm just seeing people kind of stretching themselves as far as they can, kind of financially wise. I've got a lot of people coming in trying to get exceptions, trying to use their bonuses as incomes, trying to use their, if they're Googlers, they're trying to use their equity grant as income. I mean, everyone's just trying to increase the amount of income they can use to buy a house. That's kind of what I've been seeing for the month of January. Now, whether that's the case of everyone knows there's a few exceptions available in January and they're kind of flooding to me now, but it just seems everyone seems to be trying to squeeze every last penny out of their mortgage application at the minute. And
how are banks responding to that?
If you can put together a solid case, then it's fine. I mean, they're giving exceptions where they would normally give exceptions. There hasn't really been a huge change in kind of the lending criteria. They maybe have got a bit stricter, but if it's a good case, typically it's a good case. But yeah, they're probably a bit stricter, but they're still doing things.
Okay. Is it a good time for people who might be considering buying a property this year, but maybe think that it's not a good time because they're reading about low levels of supply? Is this a good time for first-time buyers, particularly, to be making this application?
Well, I suppose the approval lasts for 6 months. The big worry for a lot of these people is that they'll apply for a mortgage and they'll get rejected for just some reason. They don't know. They've never done it before. They're first-time buyers. The trick is in the name. They don't really know what they're doing most of the time, which is fine. That's why we exist. So yeah, it probably is worth having a go. I mean, if you're trying to try and buy something in the next 6 months, yeah, why not? If you're not going to do that, I would make sure that you're ordering stuff from the central credit register, making sure that you've no things on the credit report that you don't know about, and just make sure you're saving enough each month to be able to support a mortgage payment or paying rent that would cover a mortgage payment.
Okay, that's good. That's good advice to end on. So tips for people even thinking of getting prepared: get your credit bureau report. Make sure the savings.
Not the credit bureau. Get the other one, the central credit register. It has more on it, and it's one everyone's using, and there's stuff on it that's not on the ICB that's catching people out. So it's a big.
Oh, excellent! Thing. What's the resource website for that one?
It's the Central Credit Register. I think it's ccr.ie. The Central Credit Register. Google it, you'll find it.
Very good. That's great. That was Sean Murphy, Personal Loan Advisor at Simpler.ie. Thank you for being with us today, Sean. We need to take a quick break. Stay tuned.
93.9 Dublin South FM.
Hello and welcome back to Property Matters on Dublin South FM with myself, Carol Tallon. You can contact us on Twitter at iPropertyRadio or email hello@iPropertyRadio.com. So I'm now joined by regular guest on the show, Thomas Campbell, Managing Director at TA Group. Thomas, you're very welcome again. You reminded me before we came on air that it's actually just over a year since we've spoken to you last.
That's right, Carol. Thanks very much for having me back on. Yep, a year and a week to the day.
A year and a week. It has been an interesting year.
It has surely.
Generally when we pick up on conversations with guests, we're following on from the conversations we had last time. There's just no way this year that's the tone we can adopt. Things have just changed so much. So look, first of all, just maybe remind listeners, TA Group, what it is that you do.
So we're what we like to call a one-stop shop consultancy specialising in architectural, civil structural, fire engineering services, predominantly in the social housing sector, dealing with local authorities. So that's on a consultancy side. We also have a contracting arm that we are actually involved in the retrofit of social housing units as well. We've just actually kicked off our first project with Tipperary County Council. But a one-stop service provider to the residential sector, and we can take your project, as we said before, from conception to completion.
Very good. Thanks, Thomas. And I know from our previous conversation that despite being based in the west of Ireland, your team actually operates across across all of Ireland. And I know you mentioned the Tipperary project. How have the last, 10, 11 months of COVID, how has that been? How has it impacted your company?
Well, strangely, and I know people sometimes are uncomfortable, say, telling positive stories in the current climate, but COVID, in a strange way, when it happened last March or April, ended up being very positive for us. Because I suppose we were a relatively new company, so we were used to working remotely or working from home, so we were able to adapt to it fairly quickly. And while other more established firms with maybe a large headcount were grappling with the whole idea of remote working or how they actually manage their staff, we didn't have that headache. And we set about very aggressively tendering for new projects, and it just so happened at the time there was projects that fitted our scope of works very well. So we went after them quite aggressively, and those projects are now live, and it's working very well for us.
That's a good thing to hear. But over the past number of months, we've also heard about, companies that had successfully tendered and won work that, came to a crashing halt around COVID. So because a lot of the impact have been around projects that were at pre-commencement stages. So are you working then on essential projects or is it?
Yes, so the vast majority of our projects are deemed essential service projects, and the vast majority are social housing projects. Now, some projects, say, since Christmas or since January this year, that were just about to start on site, the local authority decided to hold back on those for a month or two. But other projects are progressing or on site, and obviously us being involved from conception, from design, 50% of our work is involved in the project before it ever gets to site. So we're quite busy on the design side of projects. Luckily enough, like I said, the projects that we went after aggressively last year, we're only in the design phase of it now, with projects hopefully hitting the ground the second half of 2021.
Very good. In terms of the design, are you seeing any impact on foot of COVID that is likely to become that's likely to influence the long-term design of new housing schemes?
Well, it's funny. I listened back to my interview from last year just to recap, see what did I actually say, and that I wouldn't contradict myself this time around.
You're a good student.
One of the items that I mentioned in relation to new builds is the ventilation and how important ventilation is. And if anyone that follows social media, people are quite vocal about ventilation and how it helps control COVID. So, and that coupled with the new regulations the Part L regulations coming in, mechanical ventilation is now becoming the norm in homes, which is a benefit and will help control not only COVID, but just a healthier environment in general in properties. And trying to get that across to people was quite hard. Where you try to promote it, people say, well, especially in, say, one-off homes, they say, well, we don't need it. We don't need it to meet the regulations. And we're saying, well, yes, by regulation it's not needed, but it's for your health. The house will feel a lot nicer. It's a lot fresher. As you can probably see by this video, directly over my head is a vent in the wall from one of the vents. So that I think may have helped to bring that to the fore.
Thomas, I'm really glad that you brought up about that conversation happening on social media, because increasingly I try not to, because I know that, from the start, we understand there's a credibility issue, to a lot of the commentary that's being said on social media. But actually around this whole issue, not just around kind of the use of or the changing use of HVAC systems, increasing air exchanges, but this issue of ventilation is one that, I hear Pat Kenny on News Talk talking about it quite frequently, and his guests are always very quick to bow out and say, I'm not an engineer, but the debate rages online about ventilation. Are we doing enough? And there seems to be this argument that if schools keep their windows open, suddenly they're safe. And we know that that's not the reality. So I suppose, as somebody who's knowledgeable in this area, how do you, well, do you ever get involved with these conversations online?
Short answer is no. It's not the forum, it's not the place for it. But as the concept for ventilation and the importance of it, the concept is correct. Like we would see a lot of people who are retrofitting their homes now, and they want ventilation, they want their house warm, and then you move the conversation onto ventilation, and the first reaction is, well, I'm not putting a hole in my wall after spending all this money ventilating it. And you try to explain to them the issues with condensation and mold growth, because their house that had drafty windows before now was sort of getting around the issue of ventilation. But when you fix those issues, you create a problem for ventilation, and it's trying to flag that to people before it becomes a problem.
Do you think in Ireland we've had enough of a focus on indoor air quality?
No. It's only, like I said, this global pandemic has brought it to, I suppose, the headlines and brought it into people's daily lives. But before that, trying to explain it to people who were either buying a new home or planning to design and build a new home, no, it was something they didn't look. Maybe we were explaining it incorrectly and they couldn't understand it. But a few people that I brought into my own home in the past, and they walk in, and it is a comment they do say once they experience it about the mechanical ventilation and heat recovery, that the house, while it's warm, it's not stuffy, it feels fresh, airy. So maybe people have to touch it, see it, smell it to be convinced.
I'm really interested at this point, even though it's quite early days, to see what types of what kind of impact the pandemic will have on the longer term design elements. But we're constantly watching for how design elements are changing for housing. So, for example, just over the last day or two, I was reading about how in terms of the traditional letterboxes we're used to, we're going to have to maybe get used to drone deliveries when we're not in the house. Are we talking about something quite futuristic, openings on the roof? Design changes as our lives change. So I suppose really the question I'm asking is, do you think the pandemic is going to have long-term impacts on how people live that's going to need to be reflected in their homes?
I know, absolutely, on so many different levels. Be it say take house design as a general statement. It's how the house functions, how people use their homes. When I was on with you last year, we were talking about 3-bed semi-detached houses in Kelchamaw. They're now redesigned to be 4 beds because the 4th bed will probably be an office. Remote working from home now is going to be the norm, and people are going to demand that. Your homes are going to have to be a much more pleasant place to be in, which they should have been from day one. But more certainly now, if people are living at home and working from home, they're going to have to be a very pleasant place to be.
I have to ask, Thomas, in Mayo, is remote working, is this feeling like a win for Mayo? Because I know there's so many rural areas in Ireland that stand to benefit from remote working. But Mayo seems to have just picked up the ball and run with it, right through to the work with the Western Development Commission, through the organisation Grow Remote. There's so many initiatives that I'm seeing, and a lot of them seem to be coming either from or to Mayo.
Yeah. I know, in fairness, the people behind those various organisations, they've been banging the drum for years, trying to promote Mayo as a alternative, I suppose, to the East Coast. And the big problem was, like, say the location was perfect, accommodation issues were not as acute as, say, along the Eastern Seaboard. The issue was always about job first of all, and then job security. But as we all realise now, the genie's certainly out of the bottle on that one, and working remotely or working from home now is a lot more acceptable. And I think employers in general, if they don't allow that or offer that flexibility, people will move to an organisation where they can have that flexibility. Now, within reason, obviously there's some certain jobs you have to be office-based, or you have to be in a particular location. But for the vast majority, people can work remotely and work from home. Now, a caveat that I think working from home all the time is not a positive. I think, as we've all discovered, if you're looking at the same 4 walls all week long, it's not the best either. And I think a happy medium or happy balance, if someone can strike that, is probably the ideal situation. And you'd hear people, organizations talk about, well, how do you instill the culture of an organization, especially with new employees? And that's why a core office or core office space will still be required, but there'll be a lot more flexibility with the general numbers.
I have to say, I'm very critical when people bring the talk about culture to the office fit out. So to me, that's, those very trendy office fit outs that we see, trendy armchairs, beanbags, things like that. And to me, if the culture of your organization depends on how funky your fit out is, I think you're probably failing at culture. There's so much more to it. And I think it's part of a larger conversation, but at some point, somewhere, we lost sight of quality of life, connection with nature, having access to outdoor space. And I think that that's something that I'm hearing. And I've experienced myself during the lockdown. I think access to outdoor space has never been more important. And I actually don't think it's necessary. It's great to have the luxury of a garden, but that isn't necessarily the main thing. It has to be access to somewhere that's, within a nice walking area. Yeah. Again, our 5K, suddenly we've all become a lot more critical of our 5K. And I suspect that there are people, in Mayo appreciating their 5K a lot more than maybe people in suburbia, and that's going to have an impact.
It is. I have friends that have lived the best part of 10, 15 years along the East Coast, and were quite happy until the pandemic hit. And then all of a sudden they said, actually, no, we want our space. We want to be able to walk in a garden or to a local park. And that has driven a large demand, as you can see in the media, for properties, I suppose, on the Western Seaboard.
Yeah, your firm, TA Group, has a good oversight on this because you have the consulting arm, but also the contracting arm. So how are things going on the contracting arm? Because I'm quite sure that the plans have changed, but for 2021, what's the ambition for the contracting arm?
So we're very particular on the projects we would take on in the contracting arm, because it's just naturally more risk associated with it. So we're very particular about the clients we take on and very particular about the projects we take on. So I suppose we were having this conversation 12 months ago, and we were talking about launching this new development in Kelchamaw, 14 units, a mixture of 3-bed and 4/5-bed detached units. That's still the goal. It was reset by 12 months. But a few things that we've learned in that time is we were really struggling, and even the funding agencies that we were speaking to, really struggling to find a benchmark and find a comparable. And like I said, we're close to Castlebar and Westport, but they're not comparable because they're larger urban areas. Anecdotal evidence we've had in the exchange of properties in the second-hand market in the last 6 months, I think prices have jumped from all right, be it from a low base, they've jumped 30 or 40,000 euros a unit of an increase.
Is that in and around Kilchamaw?
Yeah.
But is that based on a sluggish supply of second-hand market? And I'm not familiar with the market in Kilchamaw, but what we're seeing in other kind of comparable areas around the country is that people are very slow to bring their properties to the market. So the second-hand market is just so sluggish in terms of new supply.
Well, would I say that people are slow bringing their properties, second-hand properties, sluggish, bring them to the market because they have nothing to move on to themselves? Would a caveat with that? Is that the reason that you may have found?
Possibly, or it may be a case that they just think, there isn't a lot happening in the marketplace and during COVID, and yet we know that actually the very opposite is true. Estate agents are reporting record demand.
Exactly. So again, when COVID hit, of course, we paused that aspect and said, right, we're going to have to sit on this because we didn't. I think everyone thought, okay, are we back into another economic crisis? And it turns out the opposite has happened. I think people who were already in the market to buy a new home were lucky enough to maintain their jobs and are probably even in a better position now to purchase a home because they've been able to save over the past year and maintain their job. I think it is also, so I suppose before COVID, everyone was talking about Brexit. Is Brexit going to be the issue that's going to pull back house prices? Because certainly in the west of Ireland, they were saying house prices had got too high. Now, they hadn't. It was just that they had got back to, say, 2007 prices, which inflation alone would have brought them to that market. So everyone was waiting for something to correct, and it wasn't Brexit, and it hasn't been a global pandemic. And I think the market now realises, well, the houses that are for sale or the asking prices that are being proposed for new houses, that is the market, and that's what is required to make them viable.
I think that's a fair assessment, because one of the things that we've seen as a recurring theme, we're just starting into our third year of broadcasting, and one recurring theme is that, when we talk about the recovery, we need to be very mindful that the recovery from the crash was never nationwide. And there were pockets of the country, and not necessarily on the West Coast. There's pockets of the Midlands, and actually there's pockets in the East, and particularly in the Southeast, that recovery just didn't happen at a pace the way it did across the rest of the country. And it's maybe something that perhaps this pandemic is going to be a stabilizer for regional markets. But I think with the introduction and the rollout of remote work, there's definitely an opportunity there that maybe hasn't been there for the past number of decades. And I think it's a really exciting one.
Absolutely. I think we should all try and take positives out of everything. And I think the pandemic has certainly done that. It has certainly, I think, rebalanced or gave the opportunity to rebalance the country in terms of where people are settling. And I think it has put a pause on so many things for the last year that once everyone is vaccinated and the economy in general opens back up, I think the economy will go through a large growth period, because I think there's just such a pent-up demand. And I'm not just talking about property, I'm talking about all aspects of the economy. People want to go on holidays, people want to go for dinner. I think the end of 2021, hopefully in 2022, the economy could go through a great growth period.
Well, the Taoiseach seems to agree with you, and so does Michael O'Leary. So you're in good company there. That was Thomas Campbell, Managing Director at TA Group. Thanks again for joining us, Thomas. We need to take a quick break. Stay tuned.
93.9 Dublin South FM.
Welcome back to Property Matters on Dublin South FM with myself, Carol Tallon. You can contact us on Twitter at iPropertyRadio or by email at hello@iPropertyRadio.com. I'm now joined by Iain Thompson, co-founder, and Ikenna Nweke, now from Office App. So we'll start with you, Ikenna. You're head of sales for UK and Ireland. So tell us a little bit about Office App.
Well, first of all, thank you, Carol, for inviting us on your show.
You're very welcome.
In a nutshell, Office App, we are the world's #1 integrations platform with a key focus all around tenant experience within the commercial real estate office environment. So quite simply, what we do from our inception, and I think we'd like to make sure that one of the key distinctions from day dot is what we do really well as a USP is we combine both the integration side of things, which is all the different technology partners that potentially would have an office building and put lots of different things like whether it's sensors and so on. We can integrate with all those great technology partners. And on the other side, we've got a really great team, we're really strong at enhancing and ensuring that we've got a great tenant experience. And we what we do best, probably the best within the sector we serve, is bringing both those two things together.
Okay, well, let's talk specifically, about some buildings. So you're head of sales for UK and Ireland. So are you operational in any buildings in Ireland to date?
Not yet, which is probably the exact reason why we've come onto your great show. So I came on board, over a year ago now. It seems like 10 with everything that's gone on.
That startup world, it's like dog years.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
And it's been a great ride, Carol. We've secured some fantastic names. If I can throw some in, Blackstone, one of the largest.
Yeah, talk to us about some of the buildings that you're in the UK.
Absolutely, yeah. So, we secured Blackstone, one of the largest dominant landlords globally, and the first particular campus we took on was gigantic. It's at 1.8 million square foot, 10,000 guests. We won it from one of the other competitors in the space, which really solidifies our standing in the marketplaces, because they already knew what they already knew the marketplace. They knew what they wanted because they had that service from a competitor. And we came in, and we've now got them as one of our key clients, and having a more in-depth discussion around other things. And one of the main things they came to us around was around the guest experience side. What we normally see is clients come to us for a number of reasons, whether it's operational efficiency, whether it's looking for something around ESG, and that's around environmental, social governance, sustainability in essence, or it's looking to elevate their tenant experience within the building or the campus, or lastly, around cost reduction, one of those kind of pillars. And then we kind of put a solution around that will actually serve to that.
Very good. And Iain, you're the co-founder here. So what was the driving force behind Office App? Were you involved in the industry previously?
Good question there, Carol. And so I wasn't. And really, for a long time, we built our business on how funny that may seem, not understanding the real estate and not wanting to understand the real estate, and not only thinking about location, not only thinking of making money work, but really thinking about the end user. How do you, Ikenna, you, me, really want to start being appreciated in the workplace and workspace, and bringing that kind of information to the forefront? So, as Ikenna said, it's we really bring that data aspect of not only showing what's happening in meeting rooms, parking spaces, general usage, access control, but also the experience side of that as well. So really getting moods into the data aspect to not only know what is happening, but also if you feel that's the right way that it's happening as an end user.
Okay. I'm always really interested when, in the early days of prop tech, we saw a lot of the innovation was consumer led, people
Yes.
identifying problems and then designing solutions. We don't see it as much in the kind of B2B marketplace here. So what was your background that I suppose helped you identify these as issues for real estate?
Yes. So there, my co-founder, Thijs, he was working on a project for a big company called Philips, the lighting, a big lighting company in the Netherlands. And there, to really make ends meet, because we both have a startup background, but to make ends meet, he was doing a project there where he actually had to connect different aspects of of software and hardware they're already working with, and this is so normal and the insight there really was, it's so normal that in our consumer lives we have everything connected to one platform. It's easy to use, and therefore we use it. And in the office space, it's not the case. Everything's different. You have the room booking for app for one thing. You have a community element that you can use on your laptop. You have to email someone if you want to get catering, and so on and so on. So that's really what we thought, that this doesn't make sense, and this will change. So that core in that thinking is bringing all these integrated services and hardware onto one platform, but then very quickly already saw that being able to do that, which is more the B2B thinking, is one aspect, but then bring that B2C thinking in there of making sure that when we've done it, it's actually used a lot, utilized a lot, to really make sure that you get that data spin out, is where the B2C thinking really really comes out. And that's why I think we're really starting to distinguish ourselves at the same time in making sure that, as we call that, the adoption engagement are at very high levels.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear something coming from concept to rollout, but having been involved in this ecosystem before, I'm aware of the time and the blood and the sweat and the tears that goes into making that a reality, because actually the commercial real estate sector is quite difficult to get a foothold into when you're talking about engaging new technologies or maybe driving efficiencies through existing technologies. So in terms of early clients, how did, Ikenna just mentioned there about your, one of the early market traction you got was for a huge premises, 10,000 occupants, I think it was.
Yes.
How as a startup did you convince, and this is for both of you, please, to join in on, how as a startup did you convince the landlord here, the building owner or occupier, that you would be capable of delivering this as a startup?
Well, that's a really good question. Actually, it's quite a funny story. So I think probably before jumping straight into that, it's probably worth mentioning, because you mentioned Iain's background when he said coming from a non-property perspective. I actually came into the company having a bit of a property perspective, especially from one of the larger landlords. So our marriages really came in at the right time. So when we approached Blackstone, it really was about a couple of things, I guess. If you remember, we were just going through, or you probably don't remember, but we were just going through the old COVID piece. So we weren't able to engage on the normal basis in terms of presentation face-to-face. And so actually, we adopted a new methodology in terms of how we would then go to market and be able to, via the new technology platforms like Zoom and so on, how we could be able to present to them. And the upshot was, it was about being able to deliver on all the aspects from a technical perspective that they were able to, because our platform is second to none. That wasn't the issue. But the thing that really came across was the fact that we understood how they operated as a business, and we echoed that within our own value chain, and also our passion. When we get into it, when we sign up a client, it's the start of a marriage, and it's usually, we have a three-year term contract. So at the start of any marriage, there has to be trust, there has to be belief, and there has to be an acceptance in both sides being able to bring something to the table. And when at the end of the presentation piece, when we're awarded that contract, one of the key things they did mention was the fact that, we absolutely feel that our team can work with you, and we feel like it's a partnership. And that's exactly what we try and do in any type of account we go into. It's a partnership, and we always like to say, your success is our success. And I guess one of the key USPs around that differentiates us from most of our competitors is the fact that we don't just put together a solution, fire and forget and walk away. The day one is the start of a 3-year term in which we will hopefully land and expand and look to get other portfolio opportunities within that.
Yeah, I like the partnership model. In fact, I think it's that is the route to sustainability for long-term relationships. But one of the things that you mentioned there in terms of what has to be there, obviously trust, credibility, expertise. But there's one important element that sometimes can be missing with the traditional real estate sector, and that is they need to value what you're bringing. They need to understand the value and be able to place a value on what your core offering is. So if your core offering is essentially primarily convenience as well, because you're bringing together and integrating a lot of disparate or isolated technologies, are you finding that the traditional real estate sector really understands how to put a value on that?
That's a really good question. So it's when we talk about ROI, and we get asked it quite a lot, how can I, from an asset manager's perspective, we get this, how can I quantify your ROI? There are a number of different conversation pieces we can look at. You mentioned there, the fact that we're presenting operational efficiency. So just in terms of time and motion, there's a cost saving there. But also the more intangible things, like when it comes to, and there's lots of different projects. For example, we signed a really great operator, a developer that's called Middlecap, and they're launching a new building in Southwark. And this building was, we came in with a partner with technical, with one of our technical solution providers, BGrid, to provide our solution. And one of the things that we were told that when it comes to the leasing journey, that potentially reduces because it's a USP in terms of the building that stands out from others within that market. Also, when it comes to the period of churn, so when it comes to maybe when the client has to renew, there may be an easier conversation for that client to stay in situ. All of these things, unfortunately, you have to be an accountant and be with them for a number of years to be able to show those numbers. But these are the kinds of conversations we have. So from the start of the contract, even prior to the contract signing, the ROI, which you can calculate from time and motion, to maybe 2-3 years on, when you can see that clients value, your tenants value the services we're providing within your campus, within your building. And because of that, they're staying longer, they're paying a higher service charge, and they're using all the different services you're offering within that.
Okay, thank you. Come ahead, Ikenna, thank you for that. And I think you've raised something really important, which, Iain, I was going to put to you. And that is the future of the office. There's so much been written about at the moment. The office is dead, long live the office. Where are you seeing it from your client's perspective?
Yeah, so in that, I think that's extremely topical at the moment, and where we seem to be accelerating our business, at least now with the experience, is actually being able to give these insights and ROIs to our customers. So on the topic of returning to work, and we just 2 weeks ago signed a customer. And I'm sure Ikenna can speak to you.
Go ahead, Iain. You go on.
That has brought us from 12 countries that we're already present in to 26 now globally, and they're utilizing us to be able to return to work safely, securely, and also knowingly, meaning how can we track when people are wanting to come back? How can we then see if they're actually coming back, what their emotion is around that, and really giving those data points to be able to do that in the best way possible. So we're seeing there's a clear return to work. I think everyone, from an emotional point of view, has had enough of being at home all the time. I think now, pre-COVID, everyone would have signed off, yes, definitely, let me work from home. Thank you very much. Now it's definitely the other way around, although it will be a hybrid. And it's, to be honest, was always going that way. And so we started the company 6 years ago, and slowly but surely, and then definitely in the last couple of years, we've seen it accelerating with in-between solutions, like of course WeWork, but also like Spaces, Regis, but also coffee shops and hotels coming into this space and offering the in-between. And what we're seeing, and the feedback from our customers, is we believe that the office, our people still want to be in the office, being both employees from corporates that we service as customers, but also landlords. So that's definitely continuing to happen. But we do see and expect and hear that there will be more fragmentation. For example, in Dublin, that there won't be one big HQ of 20, 30,000 square meters surface, but there will be one main, maybe 15, and there'll be 4 different hubs of 5,000. So people can have it more accessible, but still find that fragmentation, but connection together in the right setup. So that's definitely where we see the next steps heading.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm interested in the trends that we're starting to see emerge, but we don't know at this point, if they're going to be long-term trends or really how they're going to embed into the market. But before we finish up today, really taking things from where we are today, we know that these types of technologies, there are so many benefits for commercial landlords. However, what we see across PropTech startups is that, they're tapping in when you're offering something new, then you're looking to access resources that were never used for this before. So say for building owners and operators, how can they justify the investment in this service now with the budgets that they have, because this is something that they hadn't previously accessed before?
Yeah, it's not really, we actually come at it from a different point of view, which is the conversations we were having pre-COVID. We were already getting a lot of landlords, organizations wanting to understand and know about our product. And all that's happened now is we've become to the top of the agenda. And if you look at, in terms of a cost, if you look at it against what real estate cost is, it's an absolute fraction of that cost. But more importantly,
But you're talking, sorry, just to clarify there, because I understand what you're saying, it's a fraction of the cost. But we're at the stage now where we really need to quantify these things. So, in terms of budgets, we know what a management per square foot for commercial buildings might be. So, when we're talking about a fraction of the cost, where is it in relation to standard management of operations and for buildings?
Well, the way we try and calculate, because it's different for the UK and Ireland, the way we look at it is, first of all, we look at it as a cost per square foot, because that's how lots of our landlords and also organizations will then look to then structure that. We then structure the actual contract, so it's 3 years where the client pays 1 year in advance in terms of the actual cost. But at the back end, we're helping them, retain those clients for a longer period and a different set of client classes. We talked about the fact that a lot of what we're seeing in the future has to be underpinned by technology. The fact that you're going to be potentially working from several different locations, as well as from home, technology needs to underpin all of that. But then at the same time, being able to see the data to show you as an organization or as a landlord exactly what works and what doesn't. And that's where we're seeing the value.
Very good. Iain, you've chosen a good head of sales for UK and Ireland there.
Definitely. And thanks. I totally agree.
Okay, we need to wrap things up now. Thank you both so much for being with me today. That was Iain Thompson, co-founder, and Ikenna Nweke, head of sales for Ireland and the UK of OfficeApp. That's it from us today. Thank you for listening to Property Matters on Dublin South FM. You can get in touch with the show on social media at iProperty Radio, or indeed email hello@ipropertyradio.com. Also, my thanks as always to Peter Rice on sound and show producer Katie Tallon of Hear Me Roar Media. We're back at the same time next week. From myself, Carol Tallon, and all the team here, stay safe.